Welcome back or welcome to the Time Crunch Cyclist podcast. I'm your host, Coach Adam Pulford. Like many of my athletes, many listeners here are likely coming into their first big races or events for the year. That means it's time to stress out about the last minute marginal gains and second guess everything you've been riding on for months and months, right? Wrong. Spoiler alert, big last minute changes could do more harm than good if you don't know what you're doing. So to help bring some sense and logic to all this and to help us fine tune our equipment before our big race or event, I brought on what I think could be the best person to talk to about this particular subject. He's a father, a bike racer, owner of Velosmith Bike Studio, and a forever tinkerer of all things bikes, Tony Bustamante. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. It's great to be here.
It's great having you on. And Tony, before we get into the meat and potatoes of this show, could you tell us give us a brief history of how you got into this industry, or should I say, like helping people simplify and enjoy riding their bike?
I'm a lifelong cyclist. I was born literally into the bike business. My father owned a bike shop for 33 years. I grew up racing my bike from my earliest memories. And then that has continued. And with the exception of about a 10-year stint, I have been working in the bike industry in one form or another since 1986.
That is impressive, to say the least. And, you know, I'll link to the Velosmith website and the socials as well. Instagram, you're pumping out some beautiful pictures of your builds there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll get into that more. But one last bit about Tony here before we get into it is he was an athlete of mine that I worked with for a handful of years before COVID hit and ruined lives for everybody. And he had to make some life changes. But in that end, and one thing that I tell all my athletes, and I said this on a previous podcast, is hopefully if I'm dead and gone or we're not working together anymore, hopefully you've learned some stuff along the way and it can help you and it helps, you know, Tony manage his riding and training. But through the experience of working with him as an athlete, I got to learn how he thought about his craft. And really that brings us to this podcast today, because I've always wanted to do like a topic like this. One day I was out for a ride and I was like, man, it's Tony, because you're spanning across different brands. You're spanning of bikes and group sets, and you're working with the client one-on-one, and you're a time crunched athlete yourself. Like, you got kids, you got a business, you're trying to do your best in a short amount of time, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, from the time that we spent together, I appreciate your holistic approach to coaching. And that's something that I try to bring into the way that we approach bikes and our clients and how these bikes are going to be used, how to find the right solution for the individual rider, athlete, however you title yourself.
Yeah, that's right. The individual approach, I think, is the best approach. So with all that said, one final disclaimer: this is part one in a 2-part series of some sort of like time crunched tech talk sort of thing. But the first episode is going to be focused on best practices for race day and event equipment prep. And the second one will be finding your best tire or wheel combination for how you use your bike. Now, I'm sure my editor, Jim Rutberg, will find a way snappier title for each of those episodes. Shout out to Ruddy for always making these things sound way better than they are when they're recorded. But for all athletes now, as we turn to the actual content here, this is for all athletes coming into the final weeks before an event. Tony, I'll ask you this question. When the training is done, nutrition is dialed, and the race or event day is coming upon us, how should athletes approach their equipment?
Well, I think that the approach to equipment is very similar to your approach to training. So I think it needs to be metered, it needs to be calculated, and it helps if you have a timeline. So one of the things that bike shops have taught me is that, and I say this as a person who has raced their bike as well, people competing tend to wait to the last minute for everything related to the mechanical side of the equation. And so we are constantly trying to remind folks that that the key to this is to back up. And so you don't want to leave service work for the last minute. You don't want to change up really critical pieces. You don't want to change tires. You don't want to change drivetrain, gearing, a saddle. You certainly don't want to make changes to your fit. These are all things that have to begin further back. And it's important from a few different standpoints. I think when you're talking about fitting, when you're talking about optimizing rider on the bike, this is something that takes time. There is a small trial and error period, even when it's absolutely dialed. And there is an adjustment period. Your body is not efficient in a new position on race day. So essential. And then from a mechanical standpoint, even the best mechanics would prefer that you have a couple of rides on the bike before taking it to the event. That does so much to ensure that everything that is dialed, calibrated, is just working perfectly. It can be as simple as sealant and ensuring that the sealant is holding. It can be something more in-depth like drivetrain adjustments or these days battery swaps or replacements. So just making sure that there aren't any surprises on event day, on race day, that could have been handled in advance, weeks, days.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think for all of our listeners here, what's good about this is because we'll spend some time talking about gravel, right? Unbound, SBT, I'll throw Leadville in there. It's kind of like a gravel mountain bike hybrid, right? It'll apply to those long epic events for sure. But we're definitely going to talk about some big road races like Tulsa Tough, Toad, Speed Week, Gateway Cup. If it's a bike, this conversation is evergreen. Okay, so it's not just the long gravelly stuff. It's not the masters. It's not the pros. It's everybody. It could be a Fondo, whatever. All of this talk that we're going to discuss today applies to all things bike. So, Tony, how can we unpack this a little bit more? And how can you help us organize the process of equipment prep that spans across all things with two wheels?
I think in simplest form, I think it breaks down into three categories. So category one is related to the rider. So that's everything rider related, clothing, nutrition, gear bag. Number two is the bike. So that's going to be everything that is related to those two wheels. And then the third is going to be variables. And variables are going to be anything ranging from bags on the bike to tire selection, you name it, in the variable category.
Excellent. I would even say like the variable category, and this comes from the coaching background, right? Is like almost like a group and handling skills. Like, do you even know how to use your bike? Do you know how to use your tools? So I'm going to lump that in and mention just a few things when it comes to the variable, because in the bucket of everything else, I'm going to throw it in there because there's nothing worse than getting to a mass start event and everybody goes and there's a bunch of crashes, right? Like we want to avoid that as best we can. Anyway, we'll come back to that later. Okay, so we have the rider, the bike, and the variable. Tony,
Yep.
Let's start with the rider. Like what's encapsulated there? What's your advice when it comes to thinking about all things on the rider themselves?
So rider, I think let's start with physical person. Sure. So if training is done, if nutrition is done, all of that is ironed out, then it would also be ideal if rider feels dialed into machine. And so when we talk about a fitting at VeloSmith, we're really talking about feeling at one or feeling a part of the bike. So not wrestling with it, not fidgeting, a ride, whether it's for an hour or for 8 hours or 12 hours, the bike should be as comfortable as it can be. Arguably, rides that are in the 12-hour range, there's going to be some wrestling with the bike. But largely, if you're dialed in, then what that means is that comfort is present, that efficiency, power output, and then of course injury prevention. So cycling is one of those activities that is low impact, but it's also incredibly repetitive. So saddle height being incorrect, cleat position being incorrect over the course of a long ride or a period of training, that can generate issues. It can become a knee issue. It can become saddle sores, a host of different things. So to have rider dialed in, those elements really need to be explored, need to be unpacked, need to be dialed in well in advance. I would say that if you're preparing for an event and you've started to lay out the groundwork, the timing for this event, that's when you want to be looking at fitting. And if you're coming into this event and position feels great, you've raced on it for a couple of years, everything is good, then I think you're more inclined to just look at it from a check-in standpoint. But by leaving this window of time, you're going to be able to incorporate any of the changes on the bike in a positive way. So it's not going to lead to repetitive injuries because the adjustment period wasn't sufficient between changes and event day.
Okay. Quick question. When you say this time period of like breaking in and making those adjustments, how far out from the event are we talking? Like, what would you recommend somebody get a bike fit to have the adaptation over time, or try the new cycling clothing to make sure? Like, how long are we talking here with some of those things?
I think as much time as possible, really. So if you put a time on it, I would say maybe 12 weeks would be good. Mm-hmm. There's a handful of things that happen with fit, for example. So getting the position dialed in, ironing out any of the details, any of the fine tuning. The way that you sit on your bike, the way that you power your bike is different. It can be different. It can be radically different, but also the way the bike handles. So if your weight is further forward, is further back, the way that it steers, the way that it pitches into a corner is going to be different than the bike that you know or the bike that you knew. And so ideally, allowing time to adjust to those changes and develop a mastery of how the bike handles as well. Now, in the Chicago area, one of the things that riders from this area, any cold climate, you're going to spend time on the trainer. Yeah. And the trainer is incredibly static from a position standpoint. And so that if you are going to spend the winter preparing for an event in the summer, you should have a fitting prior to that. And it should be incorporated before you're spending time indoors on the trainer.
So here's a real world question for you. Let's just say somebody's doing SBT, which is end of June this year, and we're in the middle of May. And let's say they have saddle sores, maybe some weird hand issue, that kind of stuff. They hear this podcast and they say, "Well, Tony and Adam said 12 weeks, and it's a lot shorter than 12 weeks. I guess I'll just run what I brung and not get the bike fit." Should they get a bike fit if they have pain, even though SBT is coming up, or should they just keep on going?
Yeah, I think if you have pain, if you have obvious pain, yes, you should spend some time with a fitter. But that's also one where I wouldn't say, yes, get a fitting, and yes, make all the changes. Right. I would say that it's possible to sabotage yourself with that approach. So, yeah, pain. Sometimes the changes to remedy pain are so small that the adaptation period is very, very short. Yeah. And arguably, from experience, when the changes are for the positive, the adaptation process is also very short. It happens very quickly. But it if if you are looking for something to occupy a taper window, a bike fit is not the thing to do. Leave it; it's ready to go.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Totally agree. But I would say, I mean, for anybody, yeah, like having pain, yeah, go get checked out. And I think to Tony's point, yeah, even like a slight like saddle tilt, or maybe just a few millimeters up or down on the saddle height, or maybe there's something, with the handlebars, just micro adjustments. That's good. If you have an event, 6 to 8 weeks out, and you go to a bike fit and they want to raise your saddle like 3 inches or something, like that'd be weird. But number two, if their big changes, go in small increments. And if someone doesn't suggest the small increments, even despite the bigger change, meaning, okay, let's just do 3 mil for now, get you through the event, or see how that goes, get you through the event, and then we can make some bigger changes over the long term. That's a better approach from a fitting standpoint.
Yeah, and I think in terms of investing in self, a bike fit, like the decision to hire a coach, is taking yourself out of the equation, bring a professional in to look at it.
Good
It
point.
provides a change of perspective that can be enormous in the outcome. So we'll sometimes you mentioned saddle sores. Sometimes a saddle sore is as simple as the last time you put your bike together after a trip, the saddle is slightly crooked. It's that simple. Saddle height is correct, but it's off to an angle, and often it just takes somebody from the outside to look at it, second set of eyes, to say, I think that maybe this is the problem.
Yeah, that's it. Saddle sores as well as other issues. I've had two separate athletes travel with their bikes, have some weird like knee and like quadricep and glute issues going on, and it's simply because of that. The saddle was in there on a wrong tilt, caused some problems. Took a couple weeks to get it right, but there again, through this whole training process and focused on the rider and comfort, it's like going through the process and having some adversity is actually not bad, because it helps you figure stuff out when it goes wrong. And really the main message here is, going through the process and bringing in some outside professionals to help in that way is going to make the event go off in a much better way, right? Having the outcome that you want to do. And that means riding the equipment that you like, the bibs, the jersey, so that you know where the pockets are, where you can stash stuff. And you want to be consistent in training, so that there's nothing new on race day. I keep on preaching that over and over.
Yeah, it's I think a dress rehearsal is a really good strategy.
Yeah.
So that is in the time leading up to the event, and I think everybody is going to be different. This is not something to save for the last week, but perhaps 2 weeks out, maybe 3 weeks out, is using the gear. And so bib shorts make an enormous difference. Anybody who has trained a lot knows that there will be in the collection bibs you prefer. Those are the ones good for long days. Those are the ones that are good for hard days. That selection process should be done in advance. The same is true with shoes. I think a lot of cyclists, as they ride for a long period of time, they will amass a collection of cycling shoes. And a cycling shoe, there will be some that are more comfortable. Maybe perhaps they're roomier. There will be some that dry faster. Whatever your logic is behind the shoes, I think those need to be part of your shakeout. And in the case of an unbound, where at a midway point you plan to change shoes, that both pairs of shoes should get the shakedown rides as well. I think, to your point, looking at how much you can fit in the pockets, it's a good time to discover that one of the pockets has a tear at the bottom of it. It's really the time to figure out what equipment's going, what equipment is not going, and then be as familiar as possible with what you take.
Yeah. So quick personal story on this one. I've done a couple kind of like dress rehearsals now. I've got the Trekka coming up, which is a big gravel race in Spain. And I mean, I just want to experience it. I've got athletes going for the win. I've got athletes going to just finish, and I'll be there also just hoping to finish. And But in that way, I ride Velocio, and they have a lot of cool stuff, including the utility bibs and some of their concept stuff, which fits me well. I like the pockets because I can get my big hand with very minimal range of motion shoulders going on in there, right? So I can access the pockets well. It also has two pockets, like kind of low back, mid back, where I can stash stuff for the long haul, like gels and drink mix and that kind of thing. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pockets total. And because for a race like this, where my wife, Kristen, who's an amazing aid station support personnel, she won't be out there because it's just too hard to get there. So I can't rely upon that. So I'm just going to go full on aid stations, right? So I got to carry everything, much like everybody listening would have to do that. It's not a pro type experience. So can I carry, 2,000 calories with me, stop and get water along the way, rip and roar? So the past couple weekends, that's what I've been doing in my outfit on my rig.
Yeah, and I think you're going to add another element as well, and that is the logistics of travel that go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's having everything laid out, tested well in advance, and then leaving some essential pieces at home on your bench where you do your bike work is a bad plan. So I think in this case, incorporating what items are going, having a good thorough checklist for the items that need to be in the travel case, the items that need to be on your person, and the items that need to be in the baggage that you check is really key. For a long time, people will travel with bike in one package, and then cycling kit, shoes, helmet in another. And that's in the event that bike disappears for some reason. You still have what you need to be able to do the event, find a rental bike. And so, the logistics is a big part of it as well.
It is a big part of it. And we could spend hours talking about that. Fun fact, I did do a podcast with Carrie Warner about all things bike travel. So I'll be sure to link to that if you want to go deep on how to travel with your bike. But it's an art in itself. So I'm glad you mentioned it there, Tony. But since we're talking about the bike, let's briefly talk on a couple aspects there. When we refer to the second category as the bike, you're talking about your existing bike, not a brand new bike, right?
Yeah.
You don't
Yes.
want to buy a new
So
bike 2 weeks out. In other words,
not, yes, not a good strategy. Well, great strategy, just not for the event,
for your
but
next event.
for your next
Yes.
event. Yeah. So when talking about the bike, we're talking about having bike be fully operational,
Yep.
ready to go. Any changes that you would like to make, anything that is going to update said bike, it needs to be done in advance. So when we break down the bike here at the studio, we always describe a bike in the simplest terms, and we look at it as being made up of 4 different components. So that's the frame and fork are component 1, the wheels, component 2, the drivetrain, component 3, and the cockpit, which is saddle, seat post, handlebar stem, as component 4. And so, looking at all 4 of those components, the lead up really should do everything that it can, because at the end of the day, it's still a machine. You want to do everything that you can to make sure that it is operational. Everything on the bike is working correctly, and you have a familiarity with what's there. When you talk about gravel events, that's probably the best example, where you have such varying terrains that might be a time that would encourage you to try different gearing, to increase the gearing, remove a front derailleur, go to a 1x. These are conversations we have on a pretty regular basis. I think in those scenarios, that's work that should be done well in advance. That's work that should give you time to get used to the gearing, work that will allow you to reestablish what your favorite cadence is. The scenario like that isn't necessarily going to cost you the event, but it's one of those things that can crawl into your head and nag at you for a lot of hours in the saddle.
Yeah,
So,
like cadence is a habit, and if you change something major like in your drivetrain, that's going to change your cadence. We all know habit takes a long time to form. Not
yeah,
21 days, but more like 66 or more, right? So that it falls in line with what you're talking about of all these big changes 12 weeks out, some of these minute changes a couple weeks out,
yep.
and like let's say we're coming into a trek out, right? That's in a couple weeks. So I'm going to go to my mechanic and I've got some things that I want done, right? And I have full faith and trust in him because I've been working with him for like 2 years. What can you say about finding a good mechanic to, hand off your $10,000 bike before you travel across the ocean and go do your thing? Tell us a little bit about who should be working on this bike and how to identify them.
Well, a good bike mechanic is really about a relationship, and so finding somebody that you feel comfortable talking with, finding somebody that is that hears what you're saying, somebody who's a good communicator. Those are really the key elements. Okay, so then on top of that, somebody who is a good wrench, so someone who is familiar with your equipment. Ideally, you don't want your bike to be the first bike that somebody sees that's missing a front derailleur or has electronic shifting or tubeless tires. So I think finding somebody who has a good reputation with the type of equipment that you're using is really key. And then I think with those in place, then trust is where everything takes over. So trust that this is the date for my event. Tell me when I need to be here to have service work done so that I can have a shakeout period and not compress the timeline so much that if I need parts, we have a window to get them. Trusting that they understand the importance of the event, trusting that if they say to you, hey, replace these cables, they're worn, it'll be better with new cables, that you feel confident that, yes, that is good counsel and I will take it, and whatever you see fit is what I'll do. So that's really, really important. And then, I as a bike shop person for a long time, tip your mechanics. They love that. And if there is something that is going to pop up in the short window between departure and this issue, they're going to make sure that they get your bike taken care of as fast as possible. So no downtime.
Yep. Yep. I couldn't agree more with that. And a quick shout out to Brian Crow at Conti's Bike Shop in the DC, Conti's DC Navy Yard. He's a hell of a mechanic. And I suggest anybody in the DC area go to him for all the stuff. But to that point, I think a couple things. Yes, tip your mechanic. I mean, service industry employee, they're a professional. Like, treat them well. Treat them like anybody else that you respect, but to a high degree, because they're working on that rig that you spend, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20 hours a week on. Right. So that's an important aspect. I also think that you know, getting a discount on stuff is different than a discount on service. I've always held in my head is, I'll never discount the service, but sure, if there's a discount on tubes and tires or something like this, okay, fine, but never try to get a discount on the service. I just want to put that out in the world. So now flipping back to some of these best practices, right, leading up, I do think 2 to 3 weeks, and also pre-communicate with your mechanic to make sure that they have time for that. But 2 to 3 weeks fits for a lot of things. If you're going to, like you said, new tires, new brake cables, brake pads, new cleats on the shoes, something like that. For all our mountain bikers out there, I highly advise tuning the suspension. We don't do that enough as mountain bikers, and get that done 2 to 3 weeks out, because there is that break-in time period, whether it is the brake pad or the suspension. It just needs a little friction, a little bit of wear before it feels right again, as opposed to tight or frictiony or something like this. So 2 to 3 weeks out, give her a couple good rides, and you're on that timeline for really good success. Is there anything else on the bike that you want to mention at all here, Tony?
Yeah, I think when you do spend that kind of time on the bike, then how the bike feels in the lever throw. Those are some of the elements that you have time then to tinker with. So a service may change the way something you're familiar with feels. And then that small window gives you time now to dial it back to where everything feels good. Everything feels like it's your bike.
It's a super good point. And of particular note, one thing that can really change the feel of a bike is tires, wheels, and tire pressure. And that's one thing that we did not talk about on the bike. And some people would be like, you didn't talk about that. But we have, like I said, we have a whole part 2 of this topic coming. So we're going to save tires and wheels for that. So we'll keep everybody on the edge of their metaphorical seat until then.
Yep. Put a pin in that.
We'll put a pin in it. Let's talk about our third and final bin here of the variable, which is everything else. What are we talking about? How should we organize this leading into the main event?
So I think anybody who's going to break this down and start looking at the individual components, categorize as you will. But I think the variables are going to be elements that are going to play an important role in the event, but aren't necessarily going to be front of mind. So a point to gravel again. Gravel is so dynamic that it tends to be a great example. But if your event calls for a frame bag, that frame bag is competing with space that may now have water bottles or a frame pump. So these are things that you need to sort out in advance. And I think in addition to
a number plate,
fitting everything,
right? Or a number plate.
Or a number plate. Right? Yes, exactly. Yeah. So finding a home for everything and having it be in a familiar place is really important. These are items that should not be thrown into the bag with the intent of installing everything on race day. Another aspect of that would be if you're carrying it, if it's with you for the event, it has a purpose and it has value. So knowing how to use these items is essential. So a plug tool. Do you have a tire plug tool? If so, do you know how to use it? Is it empty from the last time you used it? Is your CO2 dead? Is your saddlebag empty? Is the tube that's in there spent? These are all things that really seem obvious when we're talking about it now. But
is your electric inflatable air tool fully charged? That's a new one.
Yes. Do you have your battery charger for your bike with you in your bag? Are the coin cell batteries in your shifters dead? Like these are the things that can derail an event after weeks and weeks and weeks of prep. And they're the kind of things that are both frustrating and avoidable.
Yeah, that's it. And a whole host of things that are like super specific to like your bike or your equipment. Make sure you have backups, especially if you're traveling overseas or something like that. The 2032 batteries, the battery chargers, anything along
set
those
of cleats.
Lines. Cleats, yeah. Yep. Derailleur hangers, if you're not UDH, all that kind of stuff. So
Yes. And all of that takes time.
Yeah.
So again, looking at the different categories, backing up, giving yourself a sufficient window to be able to sort all this stuff out. It just cannot be overstated how important these things are because, again, everything else is dialed in. The training's done. You've done all the hard training. You've ridden in the rain when you didn't want to. Nutrition is dialed in. You are ready. Leaving the rest of the event to poor planning on the bike side is short-sighted.
Yeah, that's it. And reminder to everybody listening here, it's like the assumption before this conversation started was that, the training was done. The nutrition is dialed. What is next? And I think so many people, and Tony, you can speak to this too, but like so many people hit that 2 to 3 weeks out and they're like, second guess everything. They're like, what else can I do? What else should I do? Oh, my buddy said to do this or whatever. And there's a lot of anxiety that goes on in that. So, some Big. So here's the things to avoid: any big last minute changes, any tinkering in the final weeks or days leading up to the event, and using something new on race day. Just avoid all of that. Just
Yep.
avoid it.
Yep.
Anything to
100%.
throw on there, Tony?
The example that we always use is you wouldn't wear new shoes for a marathon. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good illustration because from a cycling standpoint, you can talk yourself into making a handful of changes that won't be a big deal. But in reality, they probably will be a big deal. So yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that. Yes. And what to do is check in with your equipment full tip to tail 6 weeks out from the event. Do your dry runs, your dress rehearsals, whatever it is, and then get your bike into your mechanic 2 to 3 weeks out before the main event. Have them do a once over, make sure the rig is operating, and then do a couple shakedown rides or shakeout rides, as Tony was talking about. So everything is dialed for race day. Final
Yep.
word to you, Tony?
Keep a list and cross things off. Make sure that it all gets in the bag. It all has a purpose, and you're ready to go.
Love it. Well, let's leave it there for today, Tony. And for all of our listeners, be sure to come back next week as we discuss how to find the best tire and wheel combo and maybe how to find your best bike and how you want to ride your bike and everything that goes into that. So thanks, Tony, for sharing your time and knowledge with us here on the podcast, and can't wait to talk about tires and wheels.
Thanks, Adam.